The topic of this video is an ancient art form that is a few years away from being extinct. It is one of the most enlightening things that I encountered from our ancestral wisdom when I was a kid. Akaraka, or Igbo palm reading in Odinani, is an art form that is the exclusive domain of a spiritually gifted group of women known as the Is and Y. But because this art form was in the hands of the Is and Y, the Europeans obsessed with destroying it. But why? Like palm reading everywhere in the world, the Igbo Akaraka tells us that there's meaning in the lines of the palm, and these meanings can tell you something about yourself. Our ancestors see the lines of the palm like roads. Roads have different widths and lengths, depending on what they're designed to handle. If the road is longer, you'll spend more time driving on it if you're moving from beginning to end. If the road is wider, you can move more cars or more traffic at a time, and it is designed to handle a heavy load. So if a line on your palm is long, it says that you'll spend a long time with the traits that it represents. If the line goes from beginning to end, that trait will be a necessary part of your destiny from birth till death. If the line appears in the middle and ends in the middle, then that trait is going to be necessary in the middle of your life and will leave you before your death. If the line is wide, deep, and dark, it says you will have a great amount of this trait because you will need it to fulfill your destiny. If the line is thin, faint, or doesn't appear at all, that's an entirely different message. Now, these are common traits with palm reading everywhere in the world, but there's something very different about Akaraka that separates it, and for me, makes it one of the most enlightening things I've had the privilege of encountering, and I'll explain why. Now, before I go into the big explanation of why, I can give this hint. Despite everything I've just said, our ancestors do not believe Akaraka predicts your future, but it instead tells you something way more profound about who you are and why you are the way you are in the present, in the past, and in the future. So what do these lines mean? This is Derek O'Fodderwell with TheMedicineShell, and today I'm going to explain Akaraka, palm reading, and Igbo spirituality. Now, before I go further, I want to take a survey. I'm really interested in seeing what you guys think. Do you believe in fate? If your answer is yes, just type A in the comments. If your answer is no, type B in the comments. There is absolutely no wrong answer. I'm really interested in seeing what you guys have to say and how many people move one way or another. So I'm taking a survey. Do you believe in fate? Now, if you want to write A and then give your reason why, or B and give your reason why, that would be even more interesting. But all I need is A, if you do believe, B, if you don't believe. If we can get about 20 answers, I'll do a separate video explaining my own belief as to whether I believe in fate. And I'll go into why and respond to some of your comments or some of your rationales in the video. The best way to support the channel is by joining our Patreon community at patreon.com/TheMedicineShell. Patrons have access to my full research library, which has hundreds of books, articles, and journals on Igbo spirituality written by Dibias, Nzes, and the foremost minds in reviving our ancestral understanding. So if you're interested in topics like Afa or divination, understanding your chi or your divine spark, learning Insibidi, our secret ancient language, or learning about a specific spirit or Abara, all of this is available for every patron in our Patreon community. Everyone who joins patreon.com/TheMedicineShell also has access to the Odinani Igbo lunar calendar. This calendar teaches you about the 13 moons, rituals and observances, as well as the 4 sacred days, which are all fused with your Google Calendar, so you can be guided by our ancestral understanding of time as you navigate your day-to-day life. Finally, if you have made the promise to yourself to learn the Igbo language this year, we are now enrolling new students at www.gedu.me. Gedu.me is an Igbo language school that I created to teach the Igbo language, customs, and culture. And when I put it together, I wanted to make sure it was guided by our ancestral understanding of how learning works rather than mimicking a Western-style language program. So this is not like anything you've ever encountered before, but it works. We have people who had never heard the language before when they came in, and within 3 months, they are speaking their ancestral tongue with their entire chests. So if you are interested in learning Igbo this year, we're enrolling new students right now at www.gedu.me. That being said, let's begin. I'm going to begin this video by explaining what each of the lines on your poem means. But there's something important I have to tell you before I go ahead and say what each of the lines on the poem means. Akaraka goes far beyond what is on the poem, and what is on the poem is only 10% of the full understanding of an individual's destiny, self, and path in the world. In fact, knowing how to read the poem is only the beginning, as the ancestral method has a slight detail that makes it radically different from the method known worldwide. Because the Akaraka that can be seen by the eye is the Akaraka that could be understood by Mado. But there's a layer that our ancestors understood that can only be seen by Mo, or spirit. And therefore, even though you're looking right at it, you cannot understand it alone, as is highlighted by the Ilu. Abanyegi otu madomara, onweikili onwea. No matter how much a person knows, they can never bury themselves. Knowledge alone is not enough to reach complete understanding. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why and how to reach that complete understanding. Line group A is the Akarakando, or the Akando. This line, or line group, means that you have the ofo, or strength, in the art of life. And I'll be explaining what this means towards the end of the video. Our ancestors see life as an art, similar to dancing, painting, or making music. An individual's ability to perform this art well is factored when an individual is taking a title or achieving ancestry. Now, if you're interested in knowing how a person achieves ancestryhood, I have a video called Ancestors Explained, and the link is below. But your Akando determines if you have the ofo in the art of living. This means that you have the authority over, or the natural inclination towards, high moral character, a powerful aura, and a natural zeal for living. An individual with a strong Akando will be skilled in their true career or craft. The Akando also determines your capacity to love and build relationships with others, and it's often what is looked at when determining things like relationships, marriage, and family bonds. As our ancestors see it, the most fundamental aspect in the art of life is one's ability to nurture and create family. Also important in this art is your ability to display the special gifts that your chi gives you upon coming into the world. And included in this part of your poem is your natural ability, or your natural zeal for living, which is seen in strength of passions and happiness, and your ability to actualize a holistic quality of life. Line group B is your Akaraka Uba, or your Aka Uba, your wealth marker. This line determines whether you have an ofo for the acquisition of material wealth in the world. Wealth in this context specifically refers to your capacity and attitude towards what the Dibia described as hunting and gathering. The Dibia that my dad spoke to said that, or he gave the example of a set of 10 farmers. So there are 10 farmers, and each of them plants 20 yams. He says that one of these farmers' entire crop will be eaten by termites. The others will produce the expected, or the average amount of produce based on what they plant. And then one or a few among them are going to produce more than what is expected, or the earth will give them more than what is expected. In this particular case, an individual's Akaoba determines how much the universe will give back to you in your own personal pursuit of wealth. The Akaoba also determines your will towards that pursuit. Now, there's a very interesting thing that is done in Ordinani, where your chi has a certain thing that is yours. So if you are supposed to be a singer, if you are supposed to be a teacher, if you're supposed to have 20 kids, right? These are things that your chi predetermines for you. But you as an individual will have a certain zeal for that thing. It'll resonate with you, and you'll have a strong desire to move towards it without anybody telling you to. The things your heart desires are the things that your chi allocates for you, or the things that you have a strong will or strong draw towards are the things your chi has already allocated for you. So in this particular case, an individual with an akaoba is similar to a hunter who produces a lot when they go hunting. But that individual will have a stronger than average passion for the art of hunting itself. self. One's chi typically does not give them what they don't want. So some people have poverty in their aka, whereas the ilu says a poor man's chi is also poor. But this individual is not going to be bothered by their poverty. They may actually appreciate it or feel better when they're in that condition. And when they become wealthy, or if they ever become wealthy, they will feel that they are outside of themselves. Historically, you could look at examples of the Buddha, various monks throughout the world, a lot of scholars and intellectuals, and even debias. Meanwhile, an individual with an akauba, which includes wealth, will feel as if they're outside of themselves or they're not complete without the acquisition of wealth or the success in the particular pursuit that they're after. If they appeal to the earth will give them an equal portion to what is on their palm or their akaraka. If they appeal to any abara or mo or their own chi, they will receive what was allocated for them in the beginning. And I'll explain this towards the end of the video. Because the forces we today call spiritual are able to see with a set of eyes our ancestors referred to as Oseora, the eyes which see the spiritual, or Alamu, whereas the individual, or Mado, is only able to see with Osenabo, or the eyes which look onto the moral world. And because they have Oseora, there are things they can see about you and the framework of the universe, which keeps them from giving you more than your chi has allotted for you. Or as the Ilu says, if you run faster than your chi, you will arrive at death before your chi does. Line C is Aka Okukwe, or the fate line. How much control an individual has over their own fate, meaning that you have the all-fault for making your will reality or bending reality to your will. This particular line is in alignment with the space in your spirit known as the Ipachi. The Ipachi is where your worldly power sits, or where your chi places your worldly power in your mo, or your spirit, meaning that whatever your chi has sent you to do in the world, the equipment, meaning spiritual and physical weaponry necessary for doing that thing, are already embedded in you. Whereas the Ilu says, it's based on each person's work that their chi creates them. In the Ipachi, an individual has everything it takes to do what their chi brought them into the world to do. This is the space of your spirit that your Ikenga sits. Your Ikenga is your physical and spiritual will, your ability to actualize what you desire through your own efforts, or the kinetic force of your chi moving through time and space. This is also the space where your Omumu sits, or your manifesting ability, your ability to make your desires an actuality without force or motion, but through the sure force of manifestation. Both the Ikenga is the masculine force an individual has in the world, while the Omumu is the feminine. And if you're interested in both concepts, I have a video called The Ikenga Explained and The Omumu Explained, and I have the links below. But with these two forces, an individual is given the ability to be a master of their own fate and actualize their unique will in the world. An individual with a strong fate line has the all-fault for longevity, and this all-fault keeps them safe from premature death. Now, it's important for me to say that towards the end of the video, you're going to understand that this is not necessarily predictive, and that there's a reason I'm saying that these things are all-fault. Because a person with a strong fate line can still die prematurely. And by applying our ancestral spiritual sciences, many of these lines and the all-fall that they hold can be changed. Iguaka, or the reading of the palm and the ancestral understanding, is similar to palmistry all over the world. The Dibia we spoke to challenged us to think about something. And he asked my dad, why is it that everywhere in the world you see human beings, there's an understanding that something fundamental and true is written in the palm of a human being? He also shared with my dad that through inspiration by his chi, he was able to see that palm reading did not come from one culture or another, but that once human beings were spread all over the world, in the beginnings of human culture, this gift was given to thousands of different people in thousands of different locations at the exact same time, through a single ray of Abia, or divine wisdom, wisdom that comes directly from Chukwu, in contrast with Ako, the wisdom that you collect from the universe. And despite landing all over the world at the same time through a single ray of Abia, there is something about Akaraka, the Igbo form of palm reading, that makes it radically different from anything I've seen before. And this difference will help you fully understand what I shared in the beginning of the video, because the etchings on your hand are only the surface in understanding Akaraka. To understand that difference, I'm going to tell a story. In this story, you'll see, as our ancestors saw, that no matter the situation, things given to you by your chi can never be taken, stopped, or denied by any force, living or non-living, even if you are the problem. This is the story of Omekagon. Human beings once believed that matters concerning the Ofo were matters concerning man in the time of Omekagon. But the ancestors say, Uche Chukwu abugi uche mmadụ. The wisdom of Chukwu is not the wisdom of human beings. This was the lesson Omekagon had to learn at the cost of his own blood. But who was Omekagon? Omekagon was the son of an Eze, the ruler and father of his community. Omekagon was the second son of the Eze, to be specific, coming into the world just after his older brother. According to Iwala, the law of the land, his older brother, the Opara or first son, would be the inheritor of his father's titles. And as Iwala says, so it shall be. For Iwala are decrees given to man by the sacred, the laws of the creator and the land itself. And no matter who we are or what we believe, what Chineke says will be, must be. For Igbo say, if your chi says you will be lost in your father's compound. But the Opara, Omekagon's oldest brother, was lazy, mean-spirited, and despised by his father, for he had none of the qualities that made a true son of the soil, let alone an heir to the Eze title. Omekagon was different. Omekagon was the one who his father used to make a name, for Omekagon was handsome, industrious, generous, and just-hearted, all of the qualities befitting a great leader, though he was the second son of the Eze. A time came in the Eze's life when he realized he wasn't becoming any younger. And so he assembled the titled men and women of the community. And when they gathered, they asked the Eze, who will be his heir? The Eze, without hesitation, looked at the crowd and said, my second son, Omekagon. He then began to sing the praises of his second son. Appalled, the assembly gasped at his utterance. Some ducked their heads in shame. Others, realizing that the Eze was going against the land itself, rose up and walked out of the Congress. For Igbo say, if one sane person follows 9 mad men, people will say that 10 mad men have walked past them. The cabinet appealed to the Eze to give his all-for to his eldest son, the mean and lazy Opara of the family. But the Eze refused, and instead he sang the praises of Omekagon. The cabinet asked the Eze, why your second son? Don't you know that this is an abomination, to deny your first son what belongs to him? Don't you know that when a people commit abominations, they will begin to use nsi against each other? And when brothers use nsi against each other, future generations will bear the burden of fixing the error of their fathers. The Eze insisted it will be his second son, for his second son was generous, just-hearted, and handsome. He was industrious and the pride of his father. And as the father returns to Alammo, his people must be led by the best man possible. When Omekagon got the news of his father's announcement, he was filled with joy. He knew that he would be the heir, so in his joy there was no surprise. And as the people protested, the Eze sang the praises of Omekagon, his shining son. But singing was not enough to sway the people, so the Eze came up with a plan. He asked his servant to prepare fine regalia for Omekagon and to bring a donkey. The Eze then instructed Omekagon to get on top of the donkey and parade through the town, answering the name of heir apparent. When the second brother saw the parade, he was filled with rage. He ran to Adibia to retrieve Obiansi, the medicine horn. He approached his brother, and in front of the land, the sky, Mado and Mo, he blew the medicine horn in front of all watching. And Omekagon, in front of everybody watching, dropped dead. His father was overwhelmed with grief. Quickly he ran to a diviner to learn what he should do next. The diviner told the Eze that he must return to the first son and beg him to blow the horn again. But before the first son blows that horn, the Eze must return to his first son what he had denied him. For that son's rights, as the heir to the title of his father, is a matter of awful. And even when the earthworm is asked, the earthworm answers, it is Ofonugu that I use to dig through the earth. His father rushed to the first son and begged him for forgiveness. In his begging, he gave his son back the blessings he had denied him, the blessings of his birth. And it was then that the first son blew the medicine horn, and as the sound spread through the land, Omekagon rose from the dead. It was on that day that people learned that Uwabu Madu na Chia, and what your chi has placed in your hand cannot be taken by any force, living or dead. This particular story, the story of Omekagon, is the story of Ofo, or the concept of Ofo, which I will explain shortly. But it's also a story on the concept of Akaraka. And in order to understand Akaraka, you must understand Ofo. In order to understand Ofo, you must understand Akaraka. And in order to understand the two of them, we must first begin by understanding how our chi creates us and why. According to Ordinary Igbo, every person is a composite of 4 forces. The first force is your chi. This is your creator, your divine spark, the animating energy that's conceived and brought you into life, and that which controls and guides you throughout life. Your eke, you as physical form, with your chi being an unmanifest intangible. Eke is the chi manifesting itself into the real world. For example, if you have an idea to write a book, the idea could be considered the chi, and then the final product and all of the effects that the book has, be it its sales, the people it inspires, and so forth, end up being the eke. In Igbo culture, there are many forms of writing and decorative art, and one of the most universal within the culture is Uli. In the Uli language, as well as the Nsibidi language, eke and Akaraka are both represented by the spiral, because your Akaraka and your eke are one and the same. After your eke is your agun or your onyowa, sometimes referred to as your chiwa. This is the part of you that reincarnates and carries the same Akaraka from generation to generation, remanifesting in different people within a family. And then finally is your mo, your aura, the unseen self, or your full spiritual universe, which in the language of Uli, as well as in Sibiri, is represented by the palm. When an individual dies, these 4 parts go their separate ways. Eke returns to the earth from which it came, matching the very popular phrase, from dust to dust. Your physical existence returns to physical existence, no longer a part of the combined whole that is you. Now, depending on how an individual visualizes the chi or what they believe about the chi, some will say your chi returns to Chukwu. Others will say your chi never came into the earth, which is what I believe for my own reasons. Your mo remains in the living world and is a part of the other half of the universe known as Alam Mo. Alam Mo is the composite world of spirits, because this same formula that is used to create you, chi, eke, agun, mo, is used to create all things. And therefore, if the universe has a physical form, the universe must also have mo. And in this case, it becomes alam mo as we occupy alam mado. And then finally, your agun or your onyowa begins the process of reincarnation. In the process of reincarnation, your agun will first return to your chi to reaffirm its akaraka, its mission and existence on earth. With your chi's approval, both your chi and your agun become one. As your agun receives etu. Etu is the wisdom of Chukwu, and in this case, the wisdom of your chi. As Chukwu is the ultimate designer, Etu plays the role of a blueprint. Etu is the universal mind of existence and inexistence, which we as individuals share with Chukwu, as it is gifted to our agun in the process of reincarnation. After your agun and your chi become one, they then go to the next space, which is Alam Madu. And within Alam Madu, they make a negotiation with Eke. As the chi is the divine father, the Eke is the divine mother. And together they form Chineke, a coupling of creator and creation, masculine and feminine, light and dark, from which all things are created and recreated. Once your agun and your chi reach Eke, they share your plans of existence and begin the process of negotiation, as it is Eke that will determine what family you were born into and how you will manifest in physical form. But before allowing you to come into the world, Eke has rules known as Iwala. Iwala are the sacred laws of the land. Because our ancestors understand all things as having personhood, the key to navigating Odinani Igbo effectively is to establish and maintain peaceful accord with all of creation. Therefore, as we are earthlings, or Umwala, we must abide by Iwala, the laws of the land. Once we agree to follow Iwala, we are given our Akaraka. The Akaraka manifest as etchings on the palm, each of these telling us something about the sacred agreements we made with creation before we came into creation, each of them being a clue to what sacred powers our chi gave us in order to achieve the mission that we told the universe we came to achieve, or to be the person we told the universe we came to be. In the process of creating an individual, one's chi will give them a purpose and will equip them with everything necessary to achieve that purpose. And therefore, in Odinani Igbo, understanding an individual's purpose is encoded in the palm, as the lines that appear darker and longer are clues to the things that you have an ofo or authority in, and the lines that are shorter and more faint, things that aren't necessarily for you or tied to your mission. And if your lines are fainter and shorter, this gives you a clue as to things that are not a part of your purpose or are inconsequential to you manifesting the being your chi created you to manifest. This Akaraka is also referred to as your Ofowa or your Ofondu, the Ofo of your life. An Ofo is a pact or an oath, and according to Odinani Igbo, it is through agreement between two things that one thing comes into existence. The entire universe is therefore a tapestry of these agreements, and these agreements have two parties between them that hold them together. There's Ala and Igwe, or earth and sky, which hold together the earth that we live in today. And the agreement between the two of them is what allows Earth to exist. There's Eke na Chi, and the agreement between the two of them is what allows creation to exist. These bilateral agreements create an Ofo between them, and this Ofo forms the building blocks of the universe or creation itself. So all things that are in existence are the result of an Ofo, and all things in existence have their own Ofo, which gives them their fundamental nature. Once you have received your Ofo, the Ofo manifests in Ogun. Now, I have a video called Ofo Explained, and there's a very detailed explanation as to what an Ofo is and its power and how it's relevant to you as a person. So the link is below. And in that video, I also explained the concept of Ogun, so I'll just briefly go over it. But the Ogun are the powers that are created by an Ofo, as well as the consequences that come with breaking or violating the Ofo. So in the video, I used the example of the apartment lease. Once you sign a lease with your apartment, you can now call this piece of property or this space your own home. You can put whatever you want into it. You can live there and so forth. If you follow the terms of your agreement and somebody decides to wake up one day and run in your apartment and throw you out, if you appeal to justice, whatever form you use to channel justice in this situation, be it a courthouse, the police, or whatever, justice will put you back into the apartment because you are still following your Ofo. Now, in this case, justice is the Ogun, as well as the rights you enjoy within the apartment, the decorating, the having a place to stay and call your own, and so forth. Now, if you violate the Ofo, so for example, you agree not to have pets, but you've kept a bunch of pets in there the whole time. Anytime justice is appealed to, Ogun will also throw you out. So whatever force of justice you guys appeal to, be it the police or the judges and so forth, if they see that you have pets in there and it violates the Ofo or the agreement you made with the apartment complex, you then get thrown out, or justice has the right to take you out. In both of these cases, the Ogun is the acting force of the Ofo. And if you remember in the story of Omeka, the earthworm said, it is the Ofo and Ogun that I used to dig the earth, that the earthworm's chi created it without arms and without any significant strength. But because it keeps to its Ofo, it's able to dig into the earth. Again, tying back to the fact that whatever your chi created you to be, you are fully equipped to be that person. But the Akaraka does not end at the poem. I had a conversation with the Dibia years ago. And this particular fact blew my mind. In fact, it's one of the things that I learned that made me shift the level of skepticism I had when I'd approach these topics. But what the Dibia told me was that your Akaraka does not end at your palm, or the etchings on your palm don't end at your palm, but that every single human being has thousands of lines, or maybe hundreds, I don't know the number, but unseen lines that run through their entire body. Right? These are unseen brown lines that run through their entire body. They appear on the face, they appear on the torso, any place you can imagine. You have these lines coursing through you. And these lines look very similar to pathways or strings, which I will get back to. So remember that string concept. Now, these lines, if a person wants to truly read your Akaraka, they would not just look at your palm, but the entire tapestry that is painted on your body. And that in the time of our ancestors, it was only an Ezenwai, which is, for lack of better terms, a female Dibia, who had the special gift of Amoma Akaraka, or Akaraka prophesizing, who would be able to see these lines on your body. And upon seeing these lines on your body, she would then take a special dye known as Uri in my dialect, or Uli as it's popularly known. She would take that dye and she would trace every single line on an individual's body. And upon tracing those lines, you can then see the full blueprint of the individual's chi. And with that blueprint, you can read the full Akaraka of an individual. But that the poem itself is only a very brief summary that does not do the full of your existence justice. These lines are what you see in the art of Uli, and it is within the human body that various patterns appear, such as X's, certain circles, wave patterns, and so forth. And reading these symbols allows the Dibia and the rest of humanity to understand the original written language of the universe. This original written language is Uli. And now, if you guys are interested in the video on Uli itself, go ahead and comment below. I hesitated to do a video about it earlier because this is one of the hardest concepts to research, because unfortunately many of the traditions that are most in danger are the traditions that belong to women, and this particular tradition is a women's tradition. But I've had the opportunity to do some work in that area, and I have a lot of really interesting things to share. So if you're interested in a video on Uli, comment below. According to Odinani Igbo, the universe is the original design. If an individual wishes to know Chukwu's design, or what the creator wants and desires of the world, they must only look onto the world, because all things that are in existence are willed by Chineke. And this original design, the design of nature, is a design that is finite, but from a finite set of patterns, it creates an infinite and ever-expanding array of patterns. So the way an individual has lines of Akaraka coursing through their entire body, the universe itself is a tapestry of strings that connect all things and illustrate the full design of Chukwu, or the Etu, the universal mind, which is carried by Agu. These lines that course through the entire universe connecting all things are known as Ete. Ete are the universal strings that make all things one. And it is through Ete that Ose, or sentient potency, travels throughout the universe, meaning the energy of Chukwu, which is life force itself, or certain enhancements such as Abia and Uche, divine inspiration, follow these strings to reach their set destination, your Akaraka, and the Ete, which spans the entire universe and beyond, are all repetitions of the single design within Etu, the mind of Chukwu, and from them we understand, and everything that will be has already been written. The movement of Chukwu's spirit through these pathways is encapsulated in one of Chukwu's titles, Osebuluwa. You know, it's very interesting. I've had this channel for about 3 years now, and I still haven't even done a video on Chukwu Abiyama, or Chukwu Okike Abiyama, which is hilarious and strange. So if you guys want to see a video on Chukwu, go ahead and comment below. I think it's long overdue. It's for this reason that our poems allow us to see Amoma Banyere Akaraka, or the prophecy within the poem. The big concept that we learned from Akaraka is that the universe is the design. What is has already been and will be. And what will be has already been written. In order for us to fully understand the design of the universe, we only need to look at what is directly in front of us and read the blueprints, which manifests throughout nature, in the cosmos, in the stars, and even the palms of our hands. Unlike palm reading outside of Igbo land, Akaraka does not predict the future, but rather tells you what your chi has equipped you with, or the things you have all fought in. This equipment is similar to items on a grocery list. If you go outside and you pick up a grocery list that somebody had dropped, and you see that it says pre-workout, exercise, clothes, and protein powder, give you an insight as to what the intention of the individual was when they put the list together. And from there, you can make a safe guess as to what you are supposed to use these things to do. To actualize what your chi says you will actualize. And that's why in the story of Umeka, the earthworm says, Obu ofonugu gamji awala. It is ofonugu that I use to dig through the earth. So with this understanding, and if we're being 100% honest, this isn't good news for everyone. Some people are looking at their palms right now and breaking into a cold sweat over the short wealth line. Over their short wealth line or their shorts. Well, honestly, probably just mainly the wealth line. Or you might even be nervous at the inexistence of one line or another. Some people's palms are completely faint, and others like myself have two completely different palms that tell very different stories from each other. So if you look at your palm and you don't like what you see, are you trapped with this fate forever? Is there a way of changing what is in your Akaraka? Or are you stuck with the fortune or misfortune that your chi gave you? Chineke created the universe in two pairs. Madon, now Mo. Madon, which occupies the physical space, and Mo, which occupies the ethereal or the unseen, what we would now refer to as the spirit. And this space is the key to changing an unfortunate Akaraka. But there's a consequence. When we wish to manipulate the physical world, it is known as Nka, turning stones into iron weapons, making planes that appear to defy gravity, manipulating fiber optic cables that allow us to communicate with each other and watch YouTube videos about Igbo spirituality, or engineering a piece of metal to move 55 miles an hour. All of this is what our ancestors referred to as Nka, which you see in the name Dide or Kanka. When we apply the same scientific and technical mind to the spiritual, ethereal, or unseen world, Alamuo, we enter an art referred to as Nsi, which today many refer to as voodoo, juju, or magic. Now, Nsi is way too vast for me to explain in this video. So if you want a standalone video where I go in depth and explain what Nsi is, leave a comment below. So for example, if you have a short and faint akaoba or wealth line, it doesn't necessarily mean that you won't be wealthy in this world. But rather, wealth is not necessary for you to be the person your chi created you to be, or it's just not a part of your spiritual calling. Now, if it is not in your chi, it'll be significantly harder to acquire in comparison to a person who has akaoba. You know, the Dibia my dad spoke to said that he typically gets annoyed when people ask him about Akaraka because they want to usually ask, oh, I'm going to South Africa, am I going to be rich? And he'll look in their hand and say that there's wealth in your palm or there's no wealth in your palm, but I can't tell you whether or not it's going to happen in South Africa. And usually they get annoyed by that answer, you know, because they think he's like a genie or something. And that's it. Now, earlier in the video, I had made a lot of mention of a few things that I wanted to talk about before closing the video out. The first thing I mentioned was the fact that the women's traditions were like obsessively suppressed by the colonial regime. The reason for this is because if you know the history of the Women's War, which I've made a video about and I've linked below, you'll know that Igbo society is broken into two parts, right? Or has like two wings of government. There is the male government and the female government. The men oversee certain parts of society and certain traditions and certain concepts, and women oversee certain aspects of society, certain traditions, and certain concepts. Now, it's not a matter of the women being beneath the man or having their rules be some type of auxiliary to what the men are doing. As you see with a lot of things in Igbo culture, it's a balance of power. So, for example, the women controlled the markets, they controlled commerce, they controlled the roads. And then on the aspect of what we now call spirituality or odinani, they were the ones who expressed certain concepts such as uli, mbari, aranomo, and of course, Igbo Akaraka or reading Akaraka. But what ended up happening was after Igbo land was taken over by the British, the governance structure of the land still made it hard to turn into a formal colony. So, for example, let's say you said you controlled an Igbo community. Well, things are still done by vote, as Igbo land is a system of republics that vote on issues and rule by consensus. And if you win a vote amongst the men, you have to go and persuade the women as well in order for something to get done. Long story short, what ended up happening was the British wanted to pass a tax on the women, which is an abomination in Igbo culture. And the women, of course, voted against this. The British went ahead and tried, and the women revolted when they shot a protesting woman. They then burnt down a bunch of jailhouses, courthouses, freed prisoners, and protested for multiple days until the British had to negotiate. Well, at the end of this, the British decided that this particular system of running a culture where both sexes have a say in what's going on was inconvenient to the colonial regime. So they began the process of specifically targeting women's traditions, suppressing them, eliminating them, and so forth. Now, it's not completely the British fault. Women were also more enthusiastic about joining the church. So, for example, now, men would meet in a Congress and women would meet in a Congress and they would make decisions. Well, men still have these meetings. They're umonadi. They still have influence in the community. And women still have theirs as well, but I come to find that almost all of theirs are directly tied to the church. And so instead of having influence over the community, you're having August meeting where you're debating, how to raise more money for the church and things like that. So for this reason, women's traditions or the things that are sacred to women in Odinani are the ones that are most in danger of being eliminated or not existing in the future. So I'm working on making videos that specifically target these things. I've done a few already, and I'll be doing more in the future. A lot of the concepts I mentioned in this video are specific to women. So if you request any of them that sound interesting to you in the comments, you're making a major contribution to keeping these traditions alive. I also made a lot of mention about my dad and Adibia. So there was a very interesting story as to how we were able to uncover a lot of this information. My dad ended up speaking to a Dibia that does Akaraka. Now, he's a man. You're not going to be able to find a woman who does it. If you do, then, send me a DM or something. I don't know. But he's a man. He specifically said that, a woman is supposed to do this, that he's not supposed to be doing it. But there are no women that he knows that are interested. And that currently a lot of DBAs are offering Akaraka, but they're doing the Indian version, is what he said, or the version that came from India. And this is the version that is more geared towards predicting the future. But according to him, the meanings of the lines are the same in both cultures. It's just that in Igbo culture, two lines can say one thing. And then, of course, there's this idea that it doesn't just end at the poem, it extends through the entire body, and so forth. So if you've watched this far, thank you very much for supporting the channel and watching this. Share this with anybody who you think would be interested. I think this video is very important just because of how rare this tradition has become. There's a lot more I can say about Akaraka, so if you want another video on Akaraka, I can do that. And of course, the best way to support the channel is joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/TheMedicineShell. We've created an amazing learning community where we are collectively growing in our understanding of the ancestral sciences. Of course, there's my full library that's available there, the digital calendar, and a lot more to come. So, with that being said, this is Derek Father with the Medicine Shell. Thank you.